So how are
So
you?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. I am just currently uh trying to wrap my head around kind of juggling everything I've got going on right now between the studio, acting gigs, kind of like trying to find like a finagle between the two. But I'm currently in the transition into doing full-time voice acting actually. I mean, we're chilling, everything's good. Uh, you know, as the kids say, hashtag blessed. I can't complain. How about yourself? How you holding up?
Oh, good. It's the same on my end. Thanks for willing to do this.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely.
So I kind of wanted to try and focus more on things you might not have talked about as much yet. Uh,
Sure.
I know I read up on your background in theater in Florida, and I did think it was interesting that you got to be in a production of The Pillow Man.
Yeah. I ended up so I got my degree in theater. That's kind of like how my foray into this world and this sort of just into this industry ended up coming out. Toward the back half of my attendance, I did The Pillow Man, which I remember going into the audition. It's that stereotypical cliche of like, I want this role. I don't think I'm going to get this role. Plenty of other talented people who look better than me, because I'm very self conscious about like appearance with theater and camera work. It always feels like, oh, unless you happen to be like 6 foot tall, happen to be slender, sleek, you know the look.
Yeah.
It feels like you're just going to lose out on a lot of roles. And my friends at that time who were directing it, they ended up giving me a callback for it, and I was just like, okay, don't get your hopes too high, but we'll try it. And yeah, I went into that callback, did the thing, gave it my all, and not too long after, ended up just getting that email being like, "Hey, we want you to do want you to play Ariel in the Pillow Man." I was like, "Oh shit, okay." Um, but yeah, that was a fun one for me. It's throughout my college career when I first got into the world.
Mhm.
Um, being that I like the college world was my first foray into it. Like I'd never been a thespian, never did acting when I was younger. I mean, I guess I did like Santa Claus in fifth grade.
Mhm.
But nothing legitimately serious. And with this, uh, it was kind of like I was getting started. I wasn't really getting that much in terms of like not screen time, but stage time, I guess, if you will. I wasn't really being cast, or if I was cast, I was cast as like a quick 2 minute, like, okay, walk on, do the thing, walk off kind of a scenario. So Pillowman was one of my first like actual big roles.
Mhm.
So that was kind of when I learned what it really, really meant to kind of perform on stage. It's like it's one thing when you get on the stage, you see the audience, you have sort of like that like excited energy kind of jumble up inside of you, and you're like, all right, this is happening, I'm doing it. But I think there's a little bit of a different energy that transforms the longer you are on there. The more you get to kind of explore a character with an audience and kind of go through this roller coaster, go through the ups and downs, not just coming on, do a bit, get a gag, get them to laugh for a second, or get them to like give their like shocked reaction and then call it off. It's like, oh, you got to do like like I said, an emotional journey going through with an audience every night that we performed.
Mhm.
But yeah, shoot, it's funny. I know you said that want to talk about things that normally don't talk about, and this is definitely one of those things. It's definitely like that. But yeah, Pillowman was fun. Pillowman was cool. It was, like I said, one of my first big roles. First starting out into acting, and yeah.
And do you think generally that you have a preference now for doing darker roles opposed to comedic, or
I I don't think I have a particular preference. I think I love it all. I know it's a such a cliched response to give, but there is something about being able to kind of reach the darker aspect of a character, or being able to use your own acting ability to explore sides that people don't normally get to see. You know, you get to kind of go into a more it feels more like acting for me, doing the darker stuff. That's
Right.
not to say that the comedic stuff isn't. It's just the darker stuff feels like there has to be just a hair more of like a realistic performance
Hmm.
versus like doing the comedic stuff. Yes, you know, you want to like contrast it with like, okay, grounded versus like over the top and having fun. But that's the other thing. You know, you go into the comedic stuff and it brings kind of like a breath of fresh air, where if you're always doing dark stuff, it brings sort of like a little levity. You get to do something that takes you out of this sort of like mindset. I'm not too big on like method and stuff like that. I know there are some actors that'll be like, oh yeah, like I really, really went there. I was in a dark place during the entire time. I don't go to that extent. That's not my style. But I will say there is something to be said about performing and having to live in that space, even as just a character on stage every night. It's like, while I myself am not necessarily going to my own like super, 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 super dark place or anything like that, to the point where it's like everything is just drab, you still do have to like live those emotions for, you know, the period of a run, rehearsals and stuff like that. And that's of course talking about like stage or
Yeah.
camera acting. Voiceover, it's just an entirely different ball game, I think, where at least with respect to like the whole anime and video games and stuff, sometimes it's, you know, just a very quick like, all right, you do a 2 hour session or a 4 hour session, and then you don't see this character either ever again, or you'll be back in a month or 2 months, or you never know. So it's like there's a little bit more of a break, slash you're just constantly like just jumping through one type of medium to another. But in terms of like theatrical work and whatnot, I think, yeah, I don't have a preference. I think if you were to like gun to my head, make me choose one or the other, I'll choose dramatic. I will choose the darker kind of feel to it. But that's if you like really force me to pick.
Okay.
But I do enjoy them both, and I think, you know, there's something to be said about performing both.
Hmm. And what do you think is, in terms of anime, what do you think is the single most emotionally involved headspace you've had to go for a character so far?
Mhm. That is a good one. I had a session with Mike McFarland on Attack on Titan.
Right.
I think it was like the third season or something like that. I played Uri Rice.
Mhm.
And that one was sort of just like a more contained, kind of just somber kind of a feel to it. A person who's kind of seen all that has been occurring, wants for there to be like good in the world, wants to right the wrongs and all this other stuff. So I think maybe that's, if I had to think about it. The current role that I'm playing right now, I'm playing a character named Hosamichi in Rumble Garanndoll.
Yep.
Uh, as I'm recording that, there are definitely moments where I'm having to kind of teeter back and forth on that a little bit. Like for the most part, that one is just like outright comedic and whatnot. Actually, funny enough, just last week I recorded on an episode where that one took a little more of a somber turn as well. Kind of like implications with you know, father relationships and his own kind of just why he is the way he is, kind of a feel to it. But outside of those two, uh, yeah, I don't think I can truly, you know, look at my vast catalog of bits and side characters and say that bit, you know,
Yeah.
uh, just a little humility in the roster of work that I've managed to amass so far in terms of anime. But yeah, I'd say Attack on Titan would be the thing I'd probably go to, and then and then this show right now.
How about the case kind of on the opposite side of that, where you think you've had to alter your voice the most significantly for something?
That is a great. I think One Piece probably is the thing that's allowed me to play with that the most.
Yeah.
Kind of, you can have that sort of over the top. I mean, I've done so many bits on that show, I don't even know. Like, I mean, yes, I played Zio, but being how expansive that show is, you're brought back to play just, different, like, oh my god, this guy's over here, and, like, kind of just going up and down the register and putting on accents and taking them off and whatnot. So I think One Piece probably takes the cake. But and that's only if we're looking at anime. If we look at the video game Smite,
Yeah.
that one I think would take the cake overall in terms of letting me fully play with a broader range, because it's very hard to show people, at least back then especially, auditions weren't as common with anime. It would be more like, if a director knew what you could do, they would call you to do the thing. Maybe every now and then there would be an audition for like a big role or something, but even then, it's a lot of like the audition sides or whatnot. You get those, and they kind of, they fall within a very, very specific vocal pattern. Like, you're not going to look at, most shonen protagonists and be like, oh, he's gonna talk like this now. It's like, that's not gonna happen. Most of what I'm gonna end up showing the directors is what you're hearing now. Just, come on, what are you looking at? Or vary it up a little bit. So it's kind of hard to really show people what you can do and to take a chance, unless you happen to be thrown on on some bits that you happen to do a thing and it was just like, oh, I didn't expect you to do that. I didn't expect that to come out of your mouth. I like that, and I will keep that in my back pocket that you can do that. Or, sometimes someone will like go around referring someone, just like, oh man, I'm looking for someone who can do an orc with a New York accent. Like, who the hell can do that? And it's just like, oh, Nazeeh can play around with that. And it's just like, oh, can he? And it's like, yeah, try that. And so word of mouth would be the other way. Right now, because there is a bigger push toward auditions and getting just more talent across the board, I've had the liberty of playing a little more with these auditions whenever the sides come in. Sometimes you'll see like the bombastic characters that you'd normally see like Sunny Straight casting, where I can do like a sort of high pitched kind of thing going. Like I said, I'm not trying to like, show any range here or like act. You get the point. But yeah, hopefully, as time goes on, with the more auditions that I do, the more bookings that come in, more auditions that happen, people can see like the broader range of what I'm actually capable of. That's why I like auditions, because it gives you a chance to say, here is what I can do. And hopefully you listen to it, and hopefully you like it.
And I haven't really seen you talk about Cloud Gaiden yet, Ms. Tora.
Laughing Under the Clouds?
Yeah.
Oh man, I'll be honest, that one I actually, that's the other thing. You work on so many things, you forget I don't have my IMDb or my resume on me, so there are things that I definitely forget that I recorded. I'm like, oh shit, I did do that, didn't I? Yeah, that was definitely one of my first bigger roles. Donald Schultz was directing that. I remember that was actually recorded during like Thanksgiving of, was it 2019? I want to say it was 2019. Like, that sounds about the right time frame. But I remember he was just like, hey, there's this bigger role. Do you want to give it a shot, see if you fit for it? I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. Like, why not? One of those things where I was like, oh, I can kind of use like my deeper, like cool guy voice or whatever. I can do that thing right here. Hey, Saramaru Kumo, where might Tenka be? Like, it's like I can like bring it just a little more down, give you that sort of like that Eric Vale quality to it. I got to play with that. That was exciting because that was my first actual big foray into being like, oh, I can do big line counts. I can, get in a booth, do the thing, and I haven't gone back and like watched it or seen it. I feel like ultimately because the directors, if they're not happy with something, they wouldn't put it through. So I don't doubt that it would be like, if I look back on it, it's fine or it's good. But I know because that was younger me, that wasn't me, that was just me 2 years ago, 3 years ago at this point. I'm sure there are things that I would nitpick, like, oh, I'd read that differently, or oh, that was the choice I went with. Like, I don't know. But yeah, that's a blast from the past.
And it's kind of going back to the dark topic, and with the series overall being dark. I know people don't really talk a lot about Ikebukuro Westgate Park either.
Right. That one, I mean, so for that one, I had like I was brought in for, I think it was maybe one session, maybe two. But I remember I came in and I was told this was like a little bit more of a kind of like a little more serious. But it's one of those things where with Ikebukuro, and a good chunk of the roster that I've worked on, I'll do my best to like look at the overarching like synopsis. I'll try to watch like the first episode to kind of see, because half the time I don't even know what I'm coming in to record. So it'll be like, oh, they want you for Ikebukuro, and I'll be like, okay, cool. That can mean a lot of things. I have no idea what episode I'm recording. I don't know what character. I don't know anything. So I'm actually, outside of the things that I ended up recording, I don't know too much about the show itself.
Okay.
And sort of just the overarching tones and everything. It's like I know what I recorded, but yeah, it's like I don't know too much. You'll probably hear me say that about like a good chunk of my catalog. You can ask me if I know about them, and I'll be like, that one doesn't ring too much of a bell. Or like, yes, that I do remember. Because some of these things I am forced to watch by virtue of just production like back end stuff that I have to do for like Okatron, or just things that I'll do for various studios. Or it's like, okay, cool, I need to watch this, or I have to go through this season, or I have to watch this. So it's like, oh yeah, I acted on that. But there are some folks, they'll get called in to do bits, characters, multiple things. For the people who get called in for like, even if they're named things, like what I was called in for Ikebukuro, for instance, sometimes it'll be like, okay, cool, we finished that, let's go ahead and record like a couple of bits. You didn't show up in episode 9, so let's do episode 9. Here's this guy that screams, or hey, here's this, do this. Because that did happen, actually. I do recall that I ended up recording some Walla as well, where it's just like, it's like this gang versus that gang, chase them. Okay, now you're getting beat up. Now you're beating up people. But just because of the sheer volume, as I'm sure you can tell by Funimation's like release schedule and just the amount of simuldubs they do, and not just Funimation, but also Bang Zoom, Sound Cadence, Studio Nano, like all of these studios. It does get difficult to keep track of after a bit, or you get called in for a few things, you don't have the time to look up all the shows and truly explore. Like you might look up some things just to get like an idea of like, okay, is it this or is it that? But you end up, I think, relying on kind of tropes a good chunk of the time. It's kind of like, oh, I'm recording on a fantasy, I'm recording on an isekai. It's like, okay, cool. I know the mentality, I know the reads, I know the style. Oh, we're recording just a harem. Okay, cool. I know this is going to be over the top. I know it's going to be silly. It's like you end up learning to kind of take what you're given and be like, okay, cool, more grounded reads, done. Oh, is this zany and silly? Is this um going to be fun, over the top? It's that sort of thing. So you end up learning to kind of do that in terms of the anime side of the industry, at least because of how fast everything is.
Mm-hmm. And I would guess that probably one of the roles you've had the most fun with so far is a Sakaki in Nuzaki-chan.
It was until I started recording Hosomichi, because
Yeah.
Hosomichi in Rumble is my first lead, like my first actual lead. So with that one, while I did mention that there were some moments where it's like a little more serious, a little more somber, grounded in terms of the thing, for the most part, Hosomichi is like at a solid, like he goes from a 5 all the way to a 10 in terms of just ridiculous energy. And so I think I've had the most fun with him so far, actually, just
Okay.
because I have been able to go and be like, give over the top reactions, tone it down, and kind of get the full range. Sakaki was also super fun. This was, one of my other like first forays into bigger roles as well, where it was essentially just a series regular. It's like every other episode I could count on him showing up, playing the sort of straight man, kind of. Rico was really the straight man in the show, but getting to play off of just him and Monica and their just ridiculous energy and relationship, just getting to kind of like play off of that also was a treat. Because while with Hosomichi, I'm playing off of Lindsay Seidel and Sarah Wiedenheft, and there's just Brendan Blaber is just phenomenal in his role. Half the time I'm setting the first tracks I'm recording, so I don't necessarily have the privilege of like, oh yeah, I'm hearing them, I'm doing it off of them. But with Sakaki, it was generally like Monica had already recorded, Rico had recorded, and I'm coming in and it's like, oh, okay, let's do this with a straight face now. Another role also that was super fun, is Misumi, actually, from A3. I forget that I recorded him too. Misumi was another fun one. That one I used an entirely different voice and range that I traditionally would not use in any capacity. That was trying to find that teetering the line of just going a little too much, but still making the character kind of relatable, adorable, but still quirky also. So that was like a fun kind of tightrope act to follow. Both roles, Tia, actually. Tia, I have a lot to thank for taking chances on me and kind of letting me further expand my range and kind of exploring and playing with that. She does a fantastic job about kind of giving you a safe space to explore. If there are things that you want to try, you go ahead and try it. They don't work, she'll let you down gently, and she'll steer you back onto the path that you need to.
Well, kind of on the topic of directing, and like you're the first person I've talked to who's based in Texas who got to be who got to be part of the Fire Emblem Heroes. Everybody else I've talked to is in LA. So it was cool to see. It was cool to see it was Lex.
Yeah, no, it was. I remember Patrick Seitz had emailed me. It was like, hey, I remember you said you were an actor, because a lot of people know me from Okratron. We're the studio that does Dragon Ball and various Funimation properties and whatnot. And so I remember Patrick emailed me. I was like, hey, are you down to audition for a thing? I remember you said you were an actor once. I was like, yeah. And he sent me the thing. And I actually didn't know what it was at that time, funny enough, because it's like you said, LA is probably familiar with what the LA sides look like and what the code names are and all that. But for me, I got those for the first time and I'm like, this looks like an anime-esque video game thing, but there are a million of those. I don't know what I'm auditioning for. I remember I came into the session and he's like, okay, cool. So you're recording on Fire Emblem Heroes. And I was like, it's one of those things where it was an absolute it was a huge victory for me, because it's like you said, not many people had recorded on Fire Emblem from Dallas at that time. Yeah, it was super super exciting just seeing that I can add Fire Emblem to the roster of the resume to be like, okay, cool. I hope this becomes a bigger thing. This is like, one of the biggest franchises. This is a super super fun series. Everyone adores it. I ended up doing research on Lex and finding out that I know that the genealogy isn't necessarily like the biggest Fire Emblem game, but I saw there was like, there's a following for it. People like Lex. I was like, all right, you know what? Yes,
Yeah.
that's me. That's my voice. I'm the English voice of Lex. um, but yeah, that was super, super, super fun. Absolutely loved. That was around the time I think I just recorded on Pokemon also. So it was like my second Nintendo property. So kind of finally being taken a little more seriously in that market, expanding my reach, having other people notice me. That's not just in the community that I have kind of emerged from. So that was absolutely huge.
And then when you were a part of Genshin Impact as well, did you audition for any of the main characters?
I don't entirely know. It's one of those things because I got auditions and I wouldn't doubt if part of the auditions were main characters, but again, it's one of those things where things are code named. Sometimes you don't necessarily see cover art and things like that. So while you may recognize what the property may be, you don't know the sort of just the scale or impact of the various characters that you were auditioning for. Of course, you enter it with the mindset of this is a huge character. This is a huge character. This is a huge. That way you can, you give it your all because you don't want to have the mindset of this is a stupid little character. Who cares? Whatever. Blah 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 blah. Submit audition. Like you don't want to treat it like that.
Yeah.
But I definitely knew I was auditioning for Genshin, despite the code names and everything. It's one of those things you can kind of sort of tell, especially if a studio has a reputation for working on a property and you see that the audition came from the studio, you're just like, this looks like that might be that. Yeah, it was definitely one of those games where, again, once I got the booking, I was just like, yes, another victory.
And have very many of the LA based projects that you've been in did you record for those remotely?
Everything I've recorded remotely.
Yeah.
Absolutely every single thing. I still have current clients ongoing that I work with, whether they're based in LA or New York or wherever. But luckily, the booth that I had this booth built not too long ago. Actually, I had this built, but even before this booth, I would use any available booth that I could at Okratron to help record, so that I was always in a professional sounded treated space and people were willing to, use those spaces because, well, Okratron is a recording studio, so no reason not to. I have had instances where I have lost work because I'm not local. So like I'll book the gig, but then when they try to set up a remote thing, they're like, "Oh no, we're not doing a remote. It's going to be in person." And I was just like, "Sorry, I'm not going to fly for this." Like, I'm willing to go out for bigger projects. I don't care about the pay, but as long as the project is worth it, I will go out. However, there are, not to discredit, things like live action dubs or anything like that, but unless you're working on something and you won't even know, and that's the other thing, you never know until after the fact. But majority of the time, for these sorts of things, you're not necessarily dealing with a Squid Game. These are usually just like straight to DVD option, putting on Netflix, putting on American Airlines, and just calling it a day. And I'm not going to fly out for that sort of stuff. I like to have a little bit of scope with the projects that I do, at least for the sake of me going out, especially given, the current climate as it is.
Yeah.
But I do have an understanding and agreement with my agent where if there is a really, really huge studio or a big project or something, if they need in person, I'm willing to do it. So it just hasn't come up at the moment is all. And yeah, despite having worked with some big studios, some of them how I have to keep under NDA. But even with like, just Bang Zoom and shoot, I don't even know what's released at this point. We'll just stick with Bang Zoom. In terms of the non-NDA stuff, yeah, everything's been remote.
Mhm. And do you still, or did you have aspiration to move to LA?
I am constantly back and forth on it.
Okay.
It's one of those instances where I just cannot justify the cost when you compare it to cost of living literally anywhere else. Right now, my girlfriend and I are renting a house, and we're paying, about 2.5K for a 2-story house.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, I'm pretty sure 2.5K in LA will get us, maybe if we're lucky, a 1-bedroom that's comfortable, and that's if we're lucky. Just the stark difference in the quality of living, especially because we have our dogs, we have our fish tanks, and all these other things. I have this giant booth, which we wouldn't mind uprooting, but that stuff is like 4 or 5 times the cost over there as a result. And it's much cheaper for me to fly out and do a gig than it is for me to just live there.
Hmm.
Currently, nothing like, I'm in the middle of moving into full-time voiceover, but a lot of the reason why I'm able to do that is because of the cost of living here. There is no way that I'd be able to do this over there with the amount that I currently make. Not comfortably, at least. Not to where I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I get to have like a nice, big, spacious apartment to myself or anything like that. Like, no. I need roommates, and I don't want roommates.
Yeah.
All these little things end up coming into play. But I will say, despite all of that, I'm open to it if the right thing falls into place.
Okay.
If the proper thing falls in, whether that means gig, whether that means money, or I don't know, somehow I want a house. Like, I'm not closed to it, and I constantly have this struggle, just constantly talking about with my girlfriend. I'm like, should I go out there? Like, even if it's not all of us, should I just go there for a few months at a time? Should I just have an apartment there, even if it's like a really, really, really shitty one? It's just like, do I? But right now the answer is no, especially like I said, given the current climate of COVID and everything like that. I'm comfortable going out as needed, but strictly as needed.
Hmm. Us going back to characters, who do you think that you personally relate to the most with who you've played so far?
I would give it a toss-up between my current character Hosomichi and Raihan from Pokemon.
Okay.
Like, not in the not in terms of like the popular streamer aspect, but definitely just a tech savvy, cocky, and confident dude walking around thinking that he's the shit. at least on the outside. And so internally I'm just a bundle of depression and nihilism. But yeah, no, I would say with Hosomichi, I mean, that's a bigger thing. Just, it's a dude who puts on faces, tries to be happy, feels miserable inside, tech savvy, happens to have a secret passion for anime, despite what he says on the outside. I'm just like, oh, that's just me.
And this is probably obvious too, but with like how evil certain characters are, you always find something that you can relate to in that as well.
To a degree, it's like, it depends on what the sort of evil is, of course, because sometimes evil, but there's what I would call justified evil, where the villain thinks they're making a better world or they think they're doing the right thing. So it's kind of a little easier to do those, you know, or like if you think about like Mr. Freeze with Batman, you know, and the whole wife scenario that has occurred now. I know that wasn't necessarily always the origin story, but you know, you can find kind of empathy in certain motivations, but there are just other characters like if they're just like straight up just psychopath killers, there isn't necessarily anything to relate to there. You just translate it is all. It's just like, oh, okay, how this person feels about killing, I feel about consuming tacos. You know, it's just like this is what that would look like if this was unleashed. So you just kind of like translate it a little bit is all. And sometimes, you know, you don't necessarily have to have a deep connection to a character. Sometimes, you know, how many times have any of us, you know, you either watched a character or performance or you know, like I know so many people love the Joker. You know, it's like sometimes you just get into like a zany or like a kind of like a bigger, larger than life kind of feel to it. Sometimes you feel like uh kind of like acting these characters. And you don't necessarily have to have like the huge emotional tie to them, you know. It's like sometimes it's like, yeah, it's just a mask. I'm putting a mask for this character.
And obviously, this is more lighter, but how do you think you can relate to Kosei?
Oh man, that is, I mean, he didn't have too much screen time, but for me, the idea of instant failure in that comedic fashion, I think there's something to be said about being like, oh man, I just failed. That sucks. I suck. You know, like you can have that sort of like self-deprecation. But you know, for as little screen time as he had, there was also like the idea of like he was surefire and cocky also for like his very first like 2 second appearance where he's just like, yeah, you're not gonna get me this time. Ah! So it's like, oh, you can find a little bit of like, yeah, I'm smarter than you. I feel that sometimes.
Mhm.
And then you realize you're not, and then well, that shit happens.
And when you did start with voiceover, were there particular actors that inspired you personally?
Yes. Um, for me, I think uh, a lot of my inspiration came from like characters than it did the actual voice actors. Because for me, I never knew voice actors.
Yeah.
I never had this sort of like stardom or like celebrityism that you know a fair amount of folks end up having. So anytime I watch something like, for instance, Armstrong, you know, in Full Metal or something, it's just like I really like that performance. I really love that character, larger than life, all that good stuff. And it's like it wasn't until later, once I finally like started getting into this, that I realized, oh, yeah, okay, so Keith David is like an inspiration.
Yeah.
Sabbath is like, you know, an inspiration. Things like that. Looking at it in hindsight, since I now know the actors who play the various characters and whatnot, I could now say that, you know, it's like, well, it's the two that I did literally just name. Keith David is just a badass, extraordinaire, just phenomenal. Um, and Sabbath, you know, he's had the sort of just range of characters that you can kind of feel for. And then who's I think I also liked it wasn't just a matter of voice actors. I think like camera actors as well were a big thing for me too. So um Edward Norton is somebody who I really, really, really liked in terms of their their roles, their acting abilities, and things that I wanted to emulate.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd say there was, if I had to like really boil it, yeah, Edward Norton was a pretty big one, actually. And of course, you have these stereotypical answers, which, you know, just because they're stereotypical doesn't make them any less true. But looking at people like Robin Williams, for instance, and sort of just like iconic, inspiring performances that make you want to like reach out and do the same. You can only hope to have a fraction of the outreach that they had in their performances.
Yeah.
And Tom Hanks.
Well, I meant to bring this up at the beginning, but assuming the credit was right, I know you did have a little short film that you were part of called Coming Home.
Yeah. Oh, that was like my first on camera thing. I remember so the theater building, we would sometimes work with the film radio major. It wasn't really like a film major, it was more like radio and like news casting kind of stuff. They had like some film stuff as well. But sometimes the two different departments would come together. And so you would have, for all intents and purposes, the film school being like, hey, we need to direct and make student films. And the acting majors, like myself, being like, okay, cool, we'll audition.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully we get something. And I auditioned, I think twice, actually. And I never got cast in anything. But the actual instructor teacher, because he was the one who would film all the auditions, he was a filmmaker too. And he reached out to me and was just like, hey, I actually want to use you in my own thing. And so Coming Home was his short film that he made. I believe he entered it in some competitions. I think he got like a couple of small awards. But yeah, that was my very, very first foray into going and recording. I remember that was like, I want to say we were there from like 6 p.m. all the way to like maybe 2, 3 in the morning, just for a singular, like, it wasn't even like an intense scene or anything. It was just a scene that took with us all just walking and talking. Like 9 hours for like just not even a minute. But yeah, Coming Home was one of the first times I got in front of a camera and was kind of got to experience what that was like, doing the same scene again and then doing it from a different angle again, and kind of seeing how it is that kind of like, you know, seeing behind the glass for a moment, kind of seeing just yeah, the illusion shattered of like, oh yeah, you know, you watch a film, you watch TV, and you know, everything looks natural and realistic and all this other stuff. But then when you're actually like filming and acting in it, it's like, oh, there's like 10 cameras pointed at you while you're trying to do this.
Yeah.
While you're trying to make sure that your costume isn't like, there's like so much stuff. And it's like, man, how does any of this look as real as it does these days? It's nutty. You have people like Ian McKellen like recording like on full green screen. It's nuts. But yeah, Coming Home, first short film.
So is there anything else that's upcoming that you're part of that you can safely talk about, or is it mostly Rumble?
Yeah, I think for safety, I'm just going to say it's Rumble, just because that was already announced and ongoing. But I have recorded with various studios, and I have further things kind of coming down the pipeline that I'm excited to eventually come out. It's just one of those things where, will it come out within a year? Will it be in 2 years? Is the project scrapped? We'll never know until it ends up happening.
Oh.
Anime has spoiled us in that you know, with simuldubs, you can find out within a couple of months who got cast as what, and week by week figure out and learn, oh, this person got cast, this person's playing this, that's that guy. But unfortunately, with the animation world, video game world, I mean, hell, even commercial world, there is just a little bit of a lengthier time gap that ends up occurring. I remember, like, for instance, the Cuphead show, which just got announced. I'm not in it, but I can tell you, I remember when I saw auditions for it over was it a year or two ago?
Mhm.
Like, it's just, yeah, sometimes you just, things go into limbo and you never know when anything is going to come out. So for the sake of safety, no, nothing I can talk about.
Okay. Well, and of course, your career is still like blossoming, and but my final question is always asking, what do you want your legacy to be?
That is a phenomenal question. It boils down to just being a guy that folks could depend on and liked to work with. I don't think it's necessarily any sort of like iconic role that I want. I mean, like, yes, there are. I would love to have one of those. I would love to be known for a thing, but I think more than anything else, I want to just be known for, the personality that I have, being known that I was not a shitty human being, that I like to have fun, not just in the booth, but just outside of it, with interviews, I can crack a smile. It's all good. Like, that's, I think, more than anything else, is I think I want the legacy to be just revolved around positive perception of my existence.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there anything that you want people to take away from your performances?
I think the biggest thing I want them to take away is that I did my best. And sometime, or rather, I did my best in the moment. There are critics out there. There are folks that will never be happy with what you did. There are people that think you suck, and that's okay. It's just, nobody ever goes into a session wanting to create a bad product.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to create a poor performance. So, yeah, I think that would be my thing. It's just that, whether or not you believe it, whether or not you liked it, I at least in that moment gave it my all. Obviously, my all differs from day to day. Some days I'm stronger than others. Some days you are just beaten down. But I at least will always give it the all of the day.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I'm glad that we got to do this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for reaching out. Thanks for having me. And I will say this one last time. I completely apologize about the mishap in the beginning. But I'm glad we were still able to get this on the way and get this done for you. And next time, I promise, if you ever want to have another conversation, dig deeper into anything, I promise I will not do what I did tonight.
Sorry.
Seriously, I feel so fucking bad about it, but
That's fine.
I'm only human.
Right.
We're trying. But no, seriously, thanks so much for reaching out and just wanting to chat. I know you must send these a lot. I know not necessarily everybody answers. I know some people just kind of are either busy, blow it off, or whatever. But I thank you for at least showing some interest in my existence. I mean, that's all I can really say, especially as, like you said, we're trying to make our careers and everything. The fact that anyone's even willing to reach out to talk lets me know that I'm at least kind of doing something right,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I started and I still like to focus on larger names. Like I've done Kari Walgren and Yuri Lowenthal and Tara Platt and people like that. But I've tried to focus more on like the new generation of anime voiceover people. So
right. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Like I said, I at least hope that means I'm doing something right if I was on your radar.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Absolutely. You take care and have a great night.
Yeah, you too. Bye.